Hello, dear my friends. Welcome to AW Versatile TV. I'm Abdul Wahab reporting for my own televisions. I today sit down to give you my own opinion about the problems of France inside that country, about the French people and the French Muslims and the rest of the Muslims of the world. More than a week after the gruesome murder of French teacher Samuel Paty by Chechen refugees, France remains gripped by shock, hatred, and despair. The terrorist attack which followed Samuel Paty's decision to show the controversial Charlie Hebdo caricature of Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu in class 2 students has intensified anti-Muslim sentiments. Once again, France's Muslim citizens find themselves at the heart of a debate that holds their religion and its symbols in contempt and smears and vilifies them in political sphere, mainstream media and social media networks. And once again, the ruling elite and a large part of the French society are in denial about the true roots of radicalization. But this time around, it seems the head of the state is particularly intent on fanning the flames of Islamophobia. President Emmanuel Macron feels his electorate is abandoning him and thinks the only thing that can save his political career is taking a page out of the far-right's playbook. Macron's faltering support. It is worth pointing out that the attack comes as France is suffering from a long-term social crisis that has been made worse by the failed policies of Macron's government. Popular anger has reached the boiling point and manifested itself in street protest. In the spring of 2018, major public sector strike took place, followed by the Gilets Jaunes Yellow Vests protest in fall. Then throughout 2019, there were major demonstrations against pension reforms, fuel price hikes, police violence, and unemployment. The year ended with one of the longest public transportation strikes in French history, which paralyzed the country. This upheaval brought Macron's rating from approximately 60% when he was elected in May 2017 to merely 23% in December in 2018. Before the pandemic mobilized French society earlier this year, the French president had the approval of about 33% of the people. The slight gains Macron made at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis did not help his party in the June municipal elections, where it suffered a crushing defeat by the Greens movement in a number of large French cities. The presidential elections is scheduled for April 2022, and the French president is seemingly running out of time to come up with something that can help secure his re-election. His latest desperate attempt at gaining political ground, especially at the expense of the far-right, seems to be his decision to come after the Muslim community in France. He knows that anything that has to do with attacking Muslims galvanizes the supporters of the far-right and its racist and anti-Muslim agenda, as well as perhaps a good segment of the French left. Thus, in the early October, Macron made a special address to the nation in which he insisted that Islam is in crisis and that he was going to liberate it from foreign influences. When the murder of Samuel Paty took place less than 2 weeks later, the French president was quick to seize the moment and declared he was going to take action to eradicate Islamist extremism in France. A knee-jerk reaction. In the aftermath of the attack, Macron and his government launched a crackdown on Muslim civil society, or what they call extremists. Among the measures they took were several dozen concrete actions against organizations, associations, or individuals who carry a project of radical Islamism, according to him. As a result, more than 50 charities, including the Collective Against Islamophobia in France, CCIF, a mainstream organization that combats Islamophobia, dubbed by Minister of the Interior Gerald Darmanin as enemies of the Republic, may face dissolution. Throughout the process, Macron and his government had kept up their Islamophobic rhetoric, setting the tone of the public debate on the terror attack. Thus, a chorus of media pundits, experts, and politicians across the political spectrum have apparently united in the convictions that the French values are under threat and the general population needs to mobilize for a fight. It is wartime, declared one magazine on its front cover. Can you imagine this type of things in another country, in another part of the world? This belligerent rhetoric did not spare public figures who have came out in defense of the French Muslims community. In a TV debate, writer Pascal Bruckner accused journalist Rokhaya Diallo, whom he identified as a black Muslim woman, of having, through her words, led to the death of Charlie Hebdo's 12 cartoonists. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, head of the France Insoumise On Board France party, has also faced a smear campaign. She has been warning against the stigmatizations of Muslims. He has been accused by the political establishment of being an Islamo-leftist in an attempt to undermine the left by associating it with Islamism, which has a very negative connotation in the minds of French majority. Coincidentally or not, Mélenchon had emerged as a potential challenger to Macron in the next presidential election. If this character assassination campaign against him succeeds, Macron may have an easier time securing re-election. Actually, that is the real problem. The real problem, amid this cacophony of Islamophobia and electoral scheming, the crux of the matter has not really been addressed. For well over 2 decades, the French state has been moving in a vicious circle in its relationship with its Muslim citizens. The state still does not acknowledge the fact that Islam is the religion of France. That is not wise to systematically remind or refer to French Muslims by their racial and geographical origins. And the French Muslim issues are inherently French issues. The state does not want to recognize the fact that there is no empirical evidence to suggest that religion is a primary motivator for violent extremism and that radicalization is a social phenomenon. It continues to use terrorist incidents as a distraction from its own failed policies towards French Muslim citizens, which have led to the marginalization and alienations of an entire community. The state has done little to address job and housing discrimination, police brutality, poverty, and everyday racism, and yet it accuses the French Muslim community of failing to integrate or even of separatism. It has rallied on a security-centered approach in which Islam has been systematically perceived as an evil that society should confront, and Muslims as a threat to the way of life and to fundamental rights such as freedom of expression. For the majority of Muslims, the most blatant bias is that when it comes to criticizing or mocking Islam and its symbols, the establishment's definitions of freedom of expression is universal, absolute, and indisputable. While in insisting that Muslims embrace criticism and mockery of what is sacred to them, it has very little tolerance for criticism of Israel, Israeli policies, and Zionism. If anything, it appears that it is the state rather than the Muslim citizens that is separating itself from a segment of society and is insisting on treating them as outsiders. It clearly does not want to acknowledge that multiculturalism is an integral part of French society and should be embraced as such. Unfortunately, as long as the French state considers its Muslim citizens a fifth column and excludes them from its battle against extremism, and as long as the political establishment uses heinous terror attacks to make political gains ahead of elections, we will continue to be light years away from the Republic's core principles of social cohesion, civil peace, and dialogue. Thank you, dear my friends.